welcome back to Bourbon Barrel Talk. I'm your host, Scott Minton. Today I have three lovely ladies with me. We have the Miss Jamie Oglesly.
Hello.
Miss Kelly Kite.
Hi.
And Lindsey, I apologize. I did not get your last name before we started.
Sour.
Lindsey Sour.
Perfect.
Like sour grapes
exactly.
or like sour like
Bitters.
S-O-R-R-O-W?
S-A-U-E-R.
Oh, there we go. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I knew a Katie Sour. My wife taught a few years ago. So, well, all right. Well, hey, ladies, first of all, thanks for joining me for today's podcast. I found it interesting to talk to you guys as we tried through what I would call your all's, I guess, first go-around on what I would consider high gravity or
sophisticated.
Well, not even sophisticated, but high proof bourbon.
We are refined
full barrel
now.
strength.
Yes.
I don't know about being refined, but we're definitely we had some stuff that you have not had the chance to partake in.
Yes. Thank you for the opportunity.
So we tried Kentucky Out Confiscated. That was our opening bourbon, and then we went into OESK Four Roses. Then we had the OBSV. And then we had Elijah Craig Small Batch Barrel Proof. And then we had two Butchers 12 years that we were both hazmat bottles, so they're over 140 proof. So I took you guys from the gamut of right around 100 proof all the way up to 141.9.
We went on a journey, sir.
Absolutely. So if you don't mind, who remembers their first encounter with bourbon, and what was that like?
I mean, probably just stealing from my parents' liquor cabinet when I was a teenager.
Kelly, you naughty girl.
No, they were always big, bourbon and 7 drinkers growing up. That was their, 7-Up and bourbon.
So if you had to peg a year, I mean, you're like 16, 17 before you hit the bourbon?
Yeah, 15 to 17 probably. Wow. They would go out. My parents are very social.
Yeah.
They, have a big social life. And so be home with friends and be like, what bottle would they maybe not notice if we took, or what bottles could we maybe take a little from?
So you weren't one of those really bad kids that tried to hide it by putting water back in it, were you?
No, well, and my parents weren't big clear liquor drinkers either. So there were some for if friends came over, but they really were true bourbon drinkers. So you can't really put.
That is my only fear with my collection is that I'm almost at the point where I'm like, if my kid's drinking, I don't know that I'm really that hurt by that, but I'll be really mad if I ever find out they put water in my bourbon.
Yeah.
Yep.
They also were very
touch.
we know you're probably going to experiment with us, so we'd rather you just be honest and tell us when we're home. But then there still was that temptation, no one's home. Maybe I'll just have some of it.
How about you, Miss Jamie?
I was of age, actually.
You were of age? Yeah.
I did not have alcohol until I was literally 21.
Yeah, you said you grew up in a dry county in Kentucky. So.
Very Baptist family, no drinking, and I was scared to death of alcohol growing up. So my first bourbon encounter was actually rye. Go figure.
You love it,
but
so
I
that's good.
hated it. I was 21.
Yeah.
And I had one of those friends who she was a philosophy major and she drank, rye neat at age 21. And I was like, no, can't do this. But then a few years later, my very first date when I moved to Louisville, we went to the Back Door, and Woodford had this event because it was right before Derby, and so they had 3 tastings. So we had Woodford, Double Oaked, and then whatever, I can't remember the third one, but then I was like, okay, I love it. Just kidding. So there's that.
There you go. Miss Lindsey?
Probably about 33. I actually started with wine and just I appreciated, a good wine. Maybe branched out a little bit, but I've lived in Kentucky all my life. I've never really, appreciated a good bourbon until I went to Maker's Mark and toured the facility, got my own bottle, still have it, so I had a 12-year-old bottle sitting there.
There you go.
Well, that was part of why I thought you might be good for it. Was we went to the Downs After Dark this summer, and she was drinking bourbon, and I was like, there aren't a whole lot of women that just on their own would be like, hey, give me a glass of bourbon.
Absolutely. So, Maker's Mark. Now, have you polished off that bottle this 12 year? I mean, or is
No,
it part of the way through, or did you
still there.
It's still there because it's special to you because you bought it.
Actually, yeah. So we had some German visitors. I had an exchange program, and it was their first time touring America. We decided to take them to the distillery, and so that's kind of like a special memory for me. So I savor it a little now and then.
Oh, so you actually you've hit it. You've just not polished it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. So me, oddly enough, mine was 6 years old. my Uncle Pete wanted to teach me a lesson.
Oh my God.
So some people might have heard this story before. I don't know if I've actually heard it on the podcast. So I get up, and my dad and my Uncle Pete and a couple of my uncles are all just sitting around, Thanksgiving type dinner. I don't know if it was Thanksgiving or not. I'm just making that up at this point. But I'm like, hey, I really want some of that. And then my Uncle Pete's like, sure, go ahead, boy, grab you some. So,
Oh my God.
We'd already eaten and everything else, and I took like this big old swig right out of the bottom of the glass.
6-year-old baby?
Yeah, 6 years old. And I immediately went to the bathroom
Yep.
and put everything
Hey there.
that had for the rest of the day was,
Thanks, Uncle Pete.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
Uncle Pete, God love Uncle Pete. But,
A similar experience with beer at like maybe 3 or 4. My stepdad called it sour lemonade, and he's like, "Oh, this is for adults. It's sour lemonade."
Oh, bless.
And he would pour it out of the can or bottle into a glass, and so I thought it was literally lemonade. And so I walked up when he wasn't paying attention, and took a big old swig, and then just spit it right back in.
Just kidding.
this is not lemonade. So I know with some of you, it may be your drink of choice, or maybe it isn't. But why would you say bourbon is a drink of choice for you? Because typically, when you think of bourbon, most people think it's a manly drink, blah blah blah. But you all 3 are ladies, and I think the world wants to know why do women choose bourbon over other drinks?
Anybody want to? I'm going to go. I'm just going to go.
You just go.
Go.
Well, and let's also, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but when you go to bars and you're like, hey, I want blah, 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 blah. My specific is like, I want one rock, or like depending. And they're always like, wait, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, I'm an adult. Like, yes, that's what I want. I kind of got drawn to, it sounds weird, I got drawn to alcohol because I love the history of alcohol. I also started with wine. But like, I feel like being a Kentucky, like I was born and raised in Southern Kentucky. My roots are like Scottish heritage, and I love Scotch.
Absolutely.
But I just feel like bourbon is so complex and whiskey is so complex. I love, like there are just so many different styles and so many different flavor profiles and everything that I love. And I love like experimenting with cocktails and things like that. But I don't know. I just love I just feel like I'm like, it's my roots. Like I was meant to love bourbon. So, yeah.
Kelly.
Oh, nothing nearly that compelling.
Poetic.
Yeah,
I'm so poetic.
Yeah, nothing at all. But I went to college at IU Bloomington, so it's not like there was a huge like bourbon scene there.
No,
But
if you got anything up there, it was like clearly Canadian or Southern Comfort or maybe
Good
Crown
old
Royal.
SoCo.
right. But no, when I came home and I started working, I had a partner. I worked in public accounting who loved bourbon, and he also loved to like keep the party going when we would have events. And so he would just like bring a bunch of bourbon shots and be like, "Try this." And at first I'm like, yeah, I don't know if that's for me. And then I'm like, "Ooh, that actually tastes really good." And that was kind of where my appreciation for it started.
I guess for me, I can kind of attribute it to my brother, little baby brother. He was a chemist, and so he would brew beers. Had really fascinating ideas, and so I learned from him the love of improvisation, just discovering the limits of what you can make. So I it's kind of branched out from there. He loves a peat scotch, so
Yes, we need to hang.
yes.
Well, and it is cool. Like it's almost like a culinary style. Like I've told you guys, like I have an herb garden, and so I love making my own simple syrups. And like recently was approached over Christmas. Yeah,
Exactly.
like over Christmas, I got a phone call from another banker in Southern Indiana. He was like, "Hey, I heard you make simple syrups."
You're not allowed to talk to any other banks. Not cool.
He was like, "I would love for you to help me with like my holiday parties." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is something I could literally get into." But I love gardening, and I love using my herbs just to make like different flavors for cocktails, and I love hosting. So I just think it is really fun. But I also I'm not a sweet, like I don't like sweet things. I don't like sweet cocktails. So making like an herbal style, like it's fun to have that kind of root.
And I agree. Like it is fun also to order neat and just
Yes.
see their reaction.
Watch the bartender. They're like, "Do you mean it?"
I'm from Kentucky. Come on.
I remember I went to a bar in downtown Louisville, and you guys know I love rye. And I was like, "Hey, can I get a Sazerac?" And he goes, "We don't do cocktails here." And I said, "I mean the rye, straight up, please." And he was like, "Oh." I was like, come on.
My bad, man. My bad.
I don't have to like grow a pair to freaking drink rye, but it's fine. It's okay.
That's too funny. So you mentioned it, which oddly enough was one of the next questions I asked. So, what's your all's favorite cocktails? Like, if you're gonna drink a bourbon cocktail and you're gonna dive in, what's it gonna be? What's your pain? What's your poison?
Cocktail?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it really counts as a cocktail, but I'll usually just drink it with diet if I'm gonna mix it with something.
Okay. So you gotta watch your caliries.
Well, I've been trying to
Working on your
lately because I
fitness.
didn't for a long time. So, yeah.
That's okay.
Sazerac is probably my very favorite cocktail, but I love an old fashioned, and like I love to make an old. Like I'm picky because I really like the one I make.
That one is
But
really good.
Thank
so.
you.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I do like rosemary simple syrup with lemon and different style bitters, but I do like a good Sazerac. I feel like it's a classic New Orleans, creation.
I'm a Kentucky Mule guy. Like I
yeah.
love
Those are-
spicy
yeah.
ginger ale,
Such good
things
flavor.
like that. So if I'm going to mix my bourbon, it's probably most likely going to be that. Or I did make a trick that I learned from a friend of mine recently on the podcast with this kind of a fancy whiskey sour. So this is one of
Which
the
is
other things that
yummy.
I've been trying to go to. So
Well, and it's refreshing because bourbon, I feel like bourbon is such a winter,
Yes.
like it's warm and cozy.
Yep.
And so to have like more of a citrus feel, it's much more refreshing.
spring and summery, yeah, it brings it around for
I love a
all
good mule.
seasons. Absolutely.
Yep.
How about you, Miss Lindsey?
Oh, I'm pretty plain. I like a triple sec.
Triple sec?
Yeah.
Well, good deal. So one of the things that I've found from being in different clubs around, things like that, that I feel like women in this area especially appreciate bourbon. Louisville, Kentucky, Southern Indiana, that type of thing. Do you think the rest of the world, or when do you think the rest of the world is going to catch up to us?
I think the rest of the world is trying. I mean, the bourbon market's exploded.
Yeah, but well, if you look at the bourbon market, absolutely, the bourbon market's everywhere. But a lot of that's
But, like,
driven
women in
by
bourbon?
yes. So
Well, maybe that's a challenge to our bourbon companies to do a
Fine.
little more marketing. Like, I think of like Mila Kunis, right?
yeah,
And the marketing that she did it with Jim Beam.
Jim.
Was it Jim Beam?
I think whatever the
Wasn't it Beam?
Whatever the devil's cut is. I think
Yeah,
it's Jim
yeah,
Beam.
Yeah, that is.
So maybe it's just like a little more intentional marketing. But I mean, a lot. Maybe because we're around the region, so we're
Right.
a little more natural to gravitate to bourbon. But I don't know. I think it's
Well-
up to marketing.
And like speaking of the region, I was talking about this the other day with someone. Like, I mean, I'm born and raised here, but I feel like as far as maybe the last 15 or so years, it seems like there was this whole shift and like an intentional move towards
Yes.
we are bourbon country and this is our culture now. And not that it wasn't always here, but it wasn't pushed as heavily, as it is these days.
It's tour. I mean, it's our tourism.
Yes.
Kentucky's known for a lot of things, but I think bourbon has been one of the most positive things that we're known for.
Right. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I just posted an article on our Facebook page, and it's kind of weird about how Japan changed the face of bourbon. So if you look at kind of the history of where bourbon was, a lot of the boomers just didn't want to drink bourbon because that's what old people drank. And they started drinking like clear spirits, vodka, tequila, rum, things like that. And while we were doing that, it was odd because the Japanese started buying up basically all the bourbon. Like they were buying, 3, 4, 5 million barrels a year. And Japan's a small country,
Wow.
right? So not a lot. Talking about, populations not much larger than New York City. And they're buying millions of barrels of bourbon every single year. And then, now it's just the opposite. I mean, Japan's still buying a massive amount. And they're what's driving the secondary market and those type of things. But I feel like they kind of brought our group, that Gen X, Gen Y / area of, that, 30 to 50 year olds that are like, whoa, bourbon is it. Like, I mean, I love this stuff. So,
Well, and I feel like you see it more entertainment now too. Like when I first started, this is so silly. When I first started watching Mad Men, I was like, I want to try an old fashioned. Or yeah. Like he literally taught his kid how to make it an old fashioned for him, and I was like, man, if I could like just keep bourbon on my desk. But I don't know. Like I feel like you see more of like the hidden gems and like I don't know, the bourbon movement has. Sorry. I have a cat that's crawling on me right now.
Kitty baby.
Sorry. But yeah, I feel like bourbon movement is kind of, and it's pop culture now. Like it really is.
Yeah,
It's
see it
a
more in
huge,
Yeah.
it's a huge movement.
Yeah. What I find funny is, like, I guess periodically one of the guys in one of the clubs, he'll post pictures randomly of bourbon in either television shows or movies.
Yeah.
Then we have to try to guess which show or things it's from. And one of my favorite ones was, like, Will and Grace had a bottle of Blanton sitting on the table. I'm like, ooh, that's so
That's like an
funny,
old school
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
reference
an old
then,
school
yeah.
reference. So you really think about it, bourbon's been hot, but it's always been certain products have always drove the market a little bit more as far as that stuff goes. What about you, Miss Lindsay? Anything to add?
No, I agree. I mean, like, I agree that you see more of it in movies, and hopefully that's driving more of an interest into bourbon for people outside of Kentucky.
Right. So what about pairings? When I think of bourbon, I think of food. I think of certain foods, things like that. Is there a particular food, like if you're going out to eat to a restaurant, that you're like, ooh, I've got to have a bourbon because I'm having this?
Yeah, I think you might be overestimating my sophisticated palate here.
We may not
my
be so refined.
unsophisticated Well, I mean, like, I went out to eat with my mom about a month or so ago to Cast Iron Steakhouse there in Jeff, and I mean, I just think bourbon is good all the time, so I had bourbon that night with my steak. But
Yeah. So that's me. Like,
Yeah, I would think
Steak.
for me, it's like carnivore, like
Yeah.
anything like heavy pork chop, a steak. When I think of those things, that's what I think of. I'm like, ooh, bourbon.
yeah.
Beer you can have with anything. Wine you can kind of have with fish or chicken. When I think of that, but when I think of something hearty, you really stick your teeth into. That's what I always think of bourbon. So I was kind of curious if that's
I associate it more with dessert.
I can see
I
that
can
for
see
sure.
that, yeah.
Absolutely.
I do, and maybe it's because I like rich, because I think it pairs well with chocolate, pairs well with
right.
caramels
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
things like that. So I feel like usually, like if we're having dinner, we usually have a glass of wine and then maybe do a nightcap with bourbon and dessert.
So you mentioned this, and it just literally just threw something in my mind. And I'm hoping to actually talk to these ladies and see if they want to come on the podcast. But have you been? There's a little candy making shop. It's called Something and Truffles or things like that. It's down by Michter's on Main Street,
Oh,
and literally all of their candy they make out of alcohol. Like so, they've got
Yes.
like different varieties of chocolate truffles. They make the Old Forester, Old Majescas. So they're like the caramels
Oh,
made
God.
with whiskey, and they put it over a marshmallow.
marshmallow.
Oh.
Oh, Old Forester does
Yes.
that. Oh, geez.
Well,
they're
that's
so
where
good.
Old Forester gets them. They get them from these little ladies down there, and they sell them in their little bags
So
and
good.
stuff. But they're so phenomenally good. So I definitely see where you're coming from for that. But,
Well, I remember, I was in Belgium a few different times to do some like youth outreach work, and like obviously Belgian chocolate is like such a huge thing, and that's the first time that I ever tasted chocolate and alcohol together. I like bit into one and I was like, geez, this one is on fire. But like since then, like it's chocolate and bourbon is such a good pairing. Like I don't know what it is, but it like enhances a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, like a good bourbon ball.
Yeah, like
I do love a good bourbon ball.
and like derby pie and things like that. Like it just
yeah. So, speaking of Derby, does anyone actually really drink mint juleps? Or is that
That's how we know who the foragers are.
Yes, exactly. Like
So-
they're not my jam.
I hate mint juleps. And some people are like, "Oh my god, I love a mint julep." And
It's not
when
my favorite.
well, for one, I hate mint. Like, I mean,
Okay.
spearmint, double mint, like any of those type of things. Like when I chew bubble gum, it's something very kid-like, or
Bubblicious.
or it's cinnamon.
Yeah,
no, I mean
Bubba.
like
Bubblicious.
literally, I have Anna and Elsa grape icebreakers in my car. I mean, y'all can make fun of me all you want. Like it is my jam. Like it sits in the cup holder. I'm chomping on it. My wife orders all this different Orbit stuff and like
Yeah, see, I like minty gum.
all
but I
those
don't
weird
want
minty
bourbon
things. And I'm
drinks.
like, whoa, I do not like mint.
Like I want to like the mint julep, but I don't know. I don't mind. I love mint, like I do, but I feel like it's too sweet. Like usual
It
mint
is.
juleps around here, they make them way too sweet. So if I make my own, I'm like medium on the mint, light on the simple syrup, but it's not it's like very low on the.
It's not your jam.
Right.
It
Well,
is
it just
not my
kills me
jam.
because some people, like you said, the out-of-towners or the foreigners are like, oh, that's Derby. I'm like, oh, but is it really?
Let me show you a better cocktail to drink.
So I think it is. It is Derby. Like there's very few things that you think of when you think of Derby outside of a mint julep, or unfortunately lilies have now become the other drink of choice,
Carry
especially
over from oaks.
right. So, but like bourbon is uniquely tied to all those things when you really think about Derby and Kentucky and that whole entire market, which is one of the reasons why I love the area so much. So has anybody had the pleasure of going on a distillery tour? So what'd you think? Or what's your favorite one? I guess that would be a
Buffalo
better
Trace is my favorite.
So see, I could have pegged that. I should have just said, oh, you love Buffalo Trace, right, Jamie?
Yes.
Because you're a history guru.
I
So
am
you love
history.
the walking through the old.
Yeah. Well, and that, like I told you earlier, that was like my draw to alcohol, and especially bourbon and wine, was like the history behind it, and like embracing, like I said, like we're in Kentucky, we're like not known for the best things sometimes. And so it's really cool to know like centuries old that we've got this this beautiful history behind bourbon. But like that space is so old, and they've made use of all that, like they've recycled all that old warehouse space for their rick houses, and they have so many different products. Like it's incredible.
Yep.
I mean, some of it will set you on fire, but
We had some tonight.
yeah,
It
we
would set
did,
you on
and I
fire.
liked it. But yeah, it's just such a cool space tucked in like rural Kentucky. It's a great tour. It's free.
No, absolutely.
Like it's nice.
You get to walk around. So for me, the thing I love about Buffalo Trace is just what you said. It's like that walking through the backwoods. It's like you're walking into history when you do a Buffalo Trace tour. Where some of the other ones are very clinical, very things like that. Like Michter's is kind of very clinical, but it's cool. And like to me, Michter's has the best smell. Like when you walk into Michter's, it's just like, you're like, oh yeah,
There's that stank.
You're like, you can smell the beer, like I mean, full on, like brewing in those kettles and things like that. And it's very to me, it's very clean and clinical. And there's nothing. I liked it. I loved it, that tour. But there's something about the mystique of walking through those old hills, through the rick houses, and seeing buildings that have been there since
forever.
Since the early 1900s.
You're like, how are they still standing?
Yeah,
but
they're standing with barrels.
I know, right? I want to mention two more, and then I'm going to be quiet.
All right.
But so I love the downtown Old Forester because you get to see part of their cooperage. Like they built it, they make their own barrels and that kind of thing. So it's really cool to like you can walk upstairs and see them make the barrels. But I think the most fun, Andy and I, my husband and I both have done a couple of different tours at Evan Williams, but we did the speakeasy tour where they take you in the basement, and it's literally like you go back to 29 or 1930, and they have like higher end bourbons, and they all like Rittenhouse rye. That's where I got the rye that I love so much was from that one. But I like that one a lot too, because you get to, like, Prohibition was such a big thing for Louisville, Kentucky, and like the state in general. So I thought that was cool to go back in time a little bit.
I've only ever done one, but it was the Old Forester downtown, and I thought that was really neat. And I was like the nerd who was like, okay, so we may be learning how you make a barrel, but you clearly don't make all your barrels here, so where do you make the rest
They actually
of
have
them,
a
you know?
cooperage.
Yes, that was
it's
what
down,
I learned.
down in Shifley is where they make most of them. So
Old Forester was fun, but I guess I'll just say Maker's Mark because I like dipping my bottle in.
Yeah.
Plus the bourbon balls were a nice touch.
So what's your preferred drink then? Like, you had the experience, you liked that at Maker's. Is Maker's like your preferred drink, or?
No, I mix it around like Buffalo Trace sometimes, but I've had some Elijah Craig, and I think I'd probably, like, if I had the choice, if I could buy it anytime I wanted,
Right.
I'd stick with the Elijah Trace that we tried.
Oh, okay, yeah, the barrel proof Elijah Craig.
Yes.
How about you? Was there a favorite?
My drink of choice, we've talked about this before, though, is the Four Roses single barrel.
Yes. The sound of
Yes.
Bourbon Barrel Talk does not know that we've had this
Well, true.
conversation
Okay,
prior.
so everyone else who's listening doesn't know that I've talked to Scott, but the Four Roses single barrel, and I don't know that I'm honestly like aware of which ones I've typically drink, so I'll have to pay attention going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. You gotta pay attention to the recipe, man. You gotta pay attention to the recipe. I'll let you. Well, if you want the bottles, that
I told you,
that
hit
comes
the
with
nail
that.
on the
Yes,
head. That was my favorite of the ones we tried tonight. Was the one you thought I would like.
So you will have the recipes with you, so that way you can kind of look to see what you want to find. You'll find a lot of those ones that like Jamie preferred in most places, but it's a little bit more prevalent, I guess I would say.
As my dad would say, put some hair on your chest.
Nice.
So how about you, Miss Jamie?
So I have 3. I'm going to say my top 3. I love Old Forester 1920.
Good solid
Prohibition style. I feel like Woodford Double Oaked is another nice, approachable bourbon. I really like Kentucky Vintage. So Willett has like this line of 3. It's like Johnny Drum, Kentucky Vintage, Pure Kentucky.
Yep.
Johnny Drum is very like caramelly smooth. Kentucky Vintage is like take it up a notch, give it a little spice, and then Pure Kentucky is like hellfire brimstone. And I like that one too, but I feel like Kentucky Vintage, like you can usually get it for like $30 a bottle.
No, absolutely.
And I really like that one a lot.
Very good.
It's a good one.
So that's one of the things I've loved about this conversation so far is the fact that you guys are all picking everyday shelfers, you know.
Yes.
And unfortunately, people like
I'm
myself now is like literally and you know, and that's one of the beauties of this whole conversation and how we started this podcast was we wanted to talk to people and say, hey, what is something that you can find on the shelf pretty regularly that's a good solid drinker? Because we're literally all of us high-end bourbon collectors are all like out there trying to find. We're chasing the same 20 bottles, or the same 25 bottles, and it's annoying, but it is fun.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, when you
Thriller
basically
chase.
when you go someplace at 3 a.m. and you're drinking with a bunch of your buddies and you're just having a good time.
What does 3 a.m. look like?
It's just
Haven't
shitty
started
and cold
your
most of the time.
Have
Literally.
not experienced that
So-
like ever.
So it's shitty and cold. That's what I usually say. Because all of the really, really high-end stuff typically starts releasing in November and then kind of goes through like right about now. And then you'll have a lull and you'll have some in the summer and then it starts all back over in October, November. And, you know, it's the thrill of the chase. To find those, we like to call them unicorns, you know. That's one of the reasons why I love Four Roses is because you can go into most high-end liquor stores, as I would call them, like your Cox's or your Evergreen, Party Marts, Total Wine, and you can probably find one of their barrel picks. So that's what I tell people, especially people that are kind of trying to get into the game. You know, I'll tell them that, or I'll tell them a Russell's Reserve, because those are still things that are everyday shelfers, a little bit more on the pricey side, you know, in that $50 to $80 range. But it gives them an opportunity to try something that doesn't necessarily, you know, sit on the bottom of the shelf, which there's nothing wrong with, you know, Heaven Hill or Evan Williams or those type of bourbons. Matter of fact, JTS Brown, bottled in bond, if you've never had it, it's an $11 bourbon. It's fantastic.
$11 for what size bottle?
A typical $7.50. I mean, you can get a half gallon for like
Get a
$14 or $15.
$1.75,
Yeah. So I mean, like it's extremely, you know, cheap, but it's a good solid pour. I mean, you know, it's a really good product. So.
You know, I was surprised last weekend. I got the bottle that I got down in Nashville for like $15 less than what I pay for it in my local liquor store at home. And I was like, well, what the heck? How
was
did this
it?
happen? It was Four Roses single barrel.
So
And
that's I like to call that the Indiana tax, and people get really mad. They're like, "Oh, it can't be that bad." I'm like, "Dude, everything's more expensive, and then there's just less of it because distribution goes through Indianapolis. So by the time it gets to Southern Indiana, it's like you get the leftovers here. You
Come on over to the sunny side,
Yeah,
y'all.
that's what I should do.
So that's what I do. Like I'm spending a lot of my time, you know, and I'm one of those weird dudes. I'm a honey hole guy, so like I've got a couple of honey holes, but most of mine are in the West End, and most people don't go to the West End.
Yeah.
So I
like the West End.
So I get out there and I hang around in, you know, Portland and you know,
It's a great neighborhood.
Lively, Shively, and some of the heart of the West End, you know, Shawnee and that area. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, dude, you can find
Great
some
people there.
awesome people. Not to mention there are tons of awesome people, but like I said, most people, unfortunately, that are bourbon chasers don't necessarily go to neighborhoods that they would consider less
so
than.
you are the unicorn.
I'm definitely a unicorn just in general. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a unicorn. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
It's good. It's good.
But you wonder too if you are a bourbon chaser, because it seems to be so like in vogue or popular right now. Would you think that necessarily you would think it would be more in like a St. Matthews,
right, more Eastern,
an area like where we are right now, like because
Yeah.
it's so
more of an upscale.
Yes.
Well, the thing is, and this is what most people don't understand, is that it's an allocated product. Most of the stuff that people are chasing is allocated. And Buffalo Trace especially, they allocate it according to what you buy or the amount of money you spend with them. Well, Buffalo Trace's one of their single largest selling products is Fireball. And where do you think
goodness.
Fireball is
I
sold?
didn't know that came from them. Okay.
Yeah. Oddly enough, they opened the Fireball distillery, and they're getting ready to start actually distilling in New Albany, but they're already bottling in New Albany at the old Pillsbury plant.
Okay. I knew somebody was there. I didn't know that was them.
Yeah. So
Okay.
Sazerac bought that entire
Sazerac,
building, and they're going in there and bottling, and they just applied for their distiller's license. So I'm kind of curious to see if any bourbon from Buffalo Trace starts getting made on
I
the
sure hope
sunny
so.
side of the river.
The real sunny side
The
of the
real
river.
sunny side. Yeah, I don't know about your sunny side.
I know.
You know, you can live in Kentucky, but you really live in Indiana.
But I work in
Yeah, you're
Indiana, so it's
always in
fine.
Indiana. So you're an honorary Hoosier. We'll take you.
Thank you. I'll take that. I'll take it.
No, I parked behind you so we could have two Indiana tags.
Yes, Hoosiers
My
rule.
Hoosier plate too.
So yeah, great. Both our cars are going to get egged.
Nah, we're all friendly here.
So, what things do you want to get out of bourbon? Like when you drink bourbon, is there something like you're trying to get out of it, or
I'm always going for spicy.
You're always
Like I
going for
love
spicy.
a high rye, but like I'm a Scotch person, so anything that's more earthy
Right.
is like what I'm kind of going for. But I'm the type of person like I'm gonna get something different every time. Like if I go to Silver Dollar or any other bar, I'm gonna try to order.
So
something
by the
different.
way, when you go to Silver Dollar,
because I live right
look
there,
for
yeah.
any of their single barrel picks. They're
Okay.
all phenomenal. Like their
All right.
Eagle Rare. Their
Maybe that's our next
Blantons,
date altogether.
Their
Yeah.
antique.
So,
I mean, like all like Larry Rice it's called the Pearl. He helps them.
I love the pearl.
So he helps them procure their barrels with a group of team, and like I've never ever had a bad pick from those guys. Matter of fact, their Russell's Reserve store picks are phenomenal, and you can go in there and buy them all day long, $64.
That's awesome.
Just terrific bottles. How about you? What do you look for when you're looking for bourbon? Are you looking for that sweet? Or are you looking for spicy?
I don't know. I would say spicy, but although after your pick and when I read like what it's supposed to pick up on in the notes, I'm supposed to pick up on are sweet and fruity. So maybe I'm way off base and my palate is not all that sophisticated after all.
Just because fruity doesn't mean you're not sophisticated.
No, but most
Right,
of-
but what I'm saying is what I would say if you asked me is I would say I would be going after spicy, but clearly I have a kind of.
But you like
tendency
the
towards
bite that
this.
was hitting on the tongue and
Oh,
stuff.
yeah,
And both those were
absolutely.
higher
Yeah.
rise, absolutely.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's not necessarily doesn't mean you. I just had a funny feeling that was going to be your preference, and I don't know why.
It was very
Just
good.
off our conversation.
Are the bourbon doctor.
What's the guy that the love doctor guy? What's that? So I guess I'm the bourbon love doctor. I don't know. So-
Yes.
Well, I kind of like both. It depends on what I'm feeling like. Like I said, I like sweet. I started out with margaritas, martinis, but I also like that bite. So it depends on like what I'm eating or what I'm just feeling like at the night.
So you had the chance to have, and you actually had some high barrel proof stuff in the past. Would you pick the barrel proof over standard bourbon, or are you more like, ooh, I think I'm going to stick in that 94 to 105 range?
It's difficult to say because I like them all. But once we got to that final drink, that was amazing. Like I was blown away.
It was
was
way better
good.
than I thought it was going to be. I was very intimidated by it when you first showed me the
Right?
bottle. I was like, I don't know
Well,
about
anything
that
that has literally a nuclear power plant on the side of the bottle is probably not something you should be like, oh, I'm really excited about
It's
drinking this.
surprising. It honestly was surprising, but yeah, I would go with that.
Yeah. See, I'm a full octane guy. Like I want it straight from the barrel. Like when I try something, sometimes I'm just like, why do you put water in this? Like we literally went on a barrel pick to Knob Creek, and So they're literally thieving it right out into the glasses, and a little bit of the funk from the barrels in there.
Yeah.
It's like
Good
the
old
char
Knob
and
Creek
everything
funk.
else.
Mm-hmm.
So you're sitting there, I'm drinking this, and I'm like, this is like 137, and I'm like, why are we watering this down to 120? What the hell is wrong with you
It's
guys?
funny you say that because I did forget. It's not bourbon technically, but I did a Strand of Hands tour in Colorado last year, and they had tons of water on hand for people who couldn't handle it. I was like, really? It's not even that bad.
Yeah, come on, y'all.
Yeah.
I remember my first Knob Creek drink.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy shit.
I think that's a good everyday
Like,
drinker though.
It is, but I was like young in the bourbon.
Okay.
Like I was like, what is this? Like everything is on fire.
So if you can find them, you should go to like Total Wine, Westport Whiskey and Wine. But both of them, and they may be sold out. I might be sending you guys on a wild goose chase. But they've got some single barrel picks there. They're still 120 proof, so they're still pretty high octane. But they're like 12 years and so many months, and they got a couple of them that were 15 years and like 4 or 5 months, or 15 years and 2 or 3 months. Just a totally different monster. And when we were talking to the ambassadors at Knob Creek when we did that barrel pick, they were like, we weren't sure if we wanted to release those or not, because it's just so much more woody and so much more oaky than our typical product, because Knob Creek typically runs around 8 or 9 years. I mean, they just don't let it go any older than that. But all these, barrel picks, because of what they've done recently, have been coming out like weird old ages. So like, my recommendation would be, if you've not seen any of those, go look for them. You're going to be in one of the high end shops and look for that 10, 12-year-old. And if you, God forbid, if you find a 15-year, pick it up. Don't even hesitate. Just pick it up.
Okay. Is Pappy like the oldest?
So no, there's all kinds of stuff that's out there.
Okay.
So, we just did a podcast with Sherry and Mark Carter with Oak Carter. And they do source their barrels, but they had a 27-year. And typically, for me, anything 20 years or older typically will be just like, man, it just tastes like wood. I mean, like you really get...
Because it has been in there marinating for a while.
Yes. and oddly enough, I mean, like that one, the Heaven Hill 27, both of them are just phenomenal pours. I mean, just so tasty. But they're unicorns. I mean, you like literally, I mean, I think Sherry and them said they got 112 bottles total between the number of barrels that they got of the very old Carter. And I think like over half of them, or near half of them, they own themselves personally. Like they're in their own private stock, which they brought out one of their bottles for us to try when we were with them. And I was like, like,
how can I be so lucky?
I was like, precious.
Yes,
Straight out of Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
I was like, oh my God.
That's my
ring.
Yes, that's my ring. My wedding ring is literally a remake of the ring from Lord of the Rings. That's how nerdy I am.
Yeah. So literally, I mean, when I was drinking that 27, I was like, oh my gosh, it was so
I love those
good.
movies and books.
Me
so
too.
I can
I'm a
relate.
huge Tolkien fan.
Me
Yes.
too.
So Pappy, yes, absolutely has an older product. So have any of y'all had Pappy? 10, 15,
Well,
20, 12, lot B?
I think it was 20. It was at Bourbon Bash, though.
Okay.
When they were a client of mine. And I was kind of really aggravated because it was the third one we tried. And I was like, oh my God, I think that's the best bourbon I've ever had. And then when they tell, because it was a blind tasting, and when they tell us, I was like, how am I supposed to drink anything else tonight? And it tastes good. You've ruined my evening.
So for me, Pappy 20 is probably my second favorite of the group, but the 15-year to me is just like, it's like the perfect pour of Pappy to me. 23 is just too woody.
You talked about whatever page it was sharing the bourbon references in movies and TV. There was years ago, I can't remember the name of it, but Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson. And they had
Pappy 15.
They were like obsessed with it in this movie. They were some sort of salesman.
Yeah.
And they
The
were all
internship.
about...
Come on, how do you know?
No, is it? No,
Yeah,
that
it's
was the one
internship.
with-
Yeah,
is it?
yeah. From Google, they went to
maybe
Google.
that-
Yeah, they went to go work at Google.
Yes, okay.
And at the end, they're like,
were all
I
about
got the
some
Pappy.
Pappy.
Yeah, absolutely,
All
the
about Pappy in
internship.
that movie,
Yeah,
yes.
that is a great movie. You know, how googly are you? I'm so googly. So, but so that has. So what's the oldest bourbon anybody here's tried then? So you've had the 20-year Pappy. So that's an
Probably
old bourbon.
the oldest that I can think of. Now, I can say I don't know if it was bourbon. It might have just been whiskey. But my sister got in trouble when we were younger. From my stepdad had collected these airplane bottles from when his dad was younger, flying on airplanes.
Old
and
decanters.
She broke into one that had not been opened. And
Yeah, that's what we refer to as old dusties.
Yeah.
Now, there's a difference between being an old dusty and an actual old bourbon.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like one that actually aged that long
Yes.
versus like just a bottle that sat for forever. Yeah.
So yeah,
I get the
there's lots of
distinction,
unicorns out there. Like I don't know if you've ever seen them. They're called the Old Crow Chessmans. They're actually like the bottles are shaped like chess pieces. Like you can get an entire chess set out of bourbon decanters, and they were all made in 1969.
Oh my gosh.
So,
That's
but that is
awesome.
some sweet dusty goodness. Like you've never had an old 1969 Old Chessman. That is, it's like heaven in a bottle.
But how do you ensure, like you were talking about earlier, one that's been stored in a basement versus stored? How do you know?
Oh, you
before
don't
crack
know.
It open that
You
it's
don't
okay?
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be an STBY moment immediately. Sucks to be you that you bought that bottle and spent that much on it, and it's
And
just
it tastes
nasty
like
ass soy
motor
sauce
oil.
and vinegar. That's exactly right. I mean, and not in a good way, soy sauce, but in a bad way.
Yeah.
So it definitely can happen in that situation.
I don't know the oldest bourbon I've tried. Probably I've tried more Scotch.
That's okay. So what's the oldest Scotch you've had then? I'm gonna veer left here.
I'm gonna
you've
think
said
20
Scotch.
year.
A 20-year Scotch.
When we were in Scotland, I tried a lot.
So nothing's
Nice.
still crazy old for Scotch. I mean,
No.
Scotch can get nuts.
Yeah, I don't have that kind of money yet.
That's
so.
okay. Everybody has that kind of money. It's
I know.
just whether or not you want to piss, you
Yeah.
want to piss it away like
But
that.
I'm going more for economy right now.
Chumbawamba made a perfect song about that, pissing the night away. And how many times can you do it? And I've done it plenty.
I love
Such a
it.
character.
I love it. Yes, I have not, but yeah, I haven't ventured into very old stuff right now. But yeah, I don't know, probably 20 year for Scotch.
All right. So
Probably
the next time we
10
get
year for
together, I'm gonna
bourbon.
bring some dusty stuff.
Okay.
You'll
All
get
right.
some of that tobacco and that leather.
I
and
like
a
that
little,
tobacco
Yeah,
and
say
leather.
we learned that.
We
Little-
did. I liked it.
A little funky.
Yeah.
Funky. 1976, the Jubilee Maker Mark denim bottles.
That would be older than
What?
me.
It's older than me. I'm 77,
All
so
right,
that's actually
okay.
even older than me. But
Oh my gosh.
But we can find some stuff, man.
Okay.
That you're like, oh. How about you, ma'am, Miss Lindsay?
I think it was a 10-year Four Roses. I was at a parents' Christmas party.
Well, now you've
Yeah,
had a
broke it
12-year-old butcher's.
That's right. So
We're cranking up the volume.
I love it. So that's like my oldest.
That is
That's
your
it.
oldest. That's
It's
right.
tonight.
That's right. So we broke you in on age
I know.
and on
Woo-woo.
the octane level.
Octane level
So.
for sure.
Well, hey, ladies, I greatly appreciate you having us.
Namaste.
We appreciate the conversation.
thank you.
Anybody want to be reached out to on Facebook or Instagram if anybody wants to talk to you?
Oh, I am like nowhere near that.
No,
cool, so.
somebody wants to-
I'm not worth it,
Yeah.
but we can go get a bourbon together.
Right, yeah.
I wasn't sure, so.
You can run interference, Scott.
Yeah.
Run interference, I'd be like, all right, if you
Yeah. I'm not an expert. I just
I
like
don't know.
to enjoy the show.
I don't even know if everybody here's single or not. I know you're not, obviously.
not,
But
no.
I know you're taken.
I currently am.
All right, there you go. Kelly said I'm single and ready to mingle.
Oh, my God.
Oh, wait, real quick. Can I
What?
tell my favorite bourbon story?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay,
Listen,
okay.
I usually end this podcast with what's the stupidest thing you've done while drinking bourbon.
Okay, well, it's
But
probably
I wasn't
not
sure
the
if I should bring that
stupidest.
up with the girls.
Well, it's not the stupidest, but I will say, depending. But my favorite bourbon story is, so one of my friends works at Brown Foreman,
Yep.
and right when Andy and I got engaged, she gave me like a bottle of Woodford with our names etched on it and our wedding date, which was super sweet. Now, I'm the type that I'm going to like live in the moment. I'm not going to save this bottle. So on our wedding day, we went to like Red River Gorge. We got married. 25 people were there, like very low key. But right before we walked
Which,
down
by the way,
aisle-
sorry, before you go on, I was really mad I didn't get an invite. I mean,
I'm so sorry.
The
really?
pictures looked beautiful, though.
I know.
Thank you.
Luckily, her husband is like the master photographer, videographer, and
yeah.
somehow he figured out how to catch the
We
moment.
did. We videoed our own wedding, which was super fun.
So did
But,
you have like the drone controller in your hand?
he did do the drone. He controls that. I'm like, thumbs are not. That's not my game. I don't do that. I can push record and make sure it's in focus. That's about it. But right before we walked down the aisle, like he went first with our best friend who married us, and then I went with my dad after. And so we cracked open the bottle, and we each poured ourselves like a tiny little shot, and we like toasted with Woodford and like shot it real quick, and then went down the aisle and got married. And it's like my favorite bourbon moment.
There you go. It
Like,
should be.
It was so much fun, and it was like one of those things where we were like, we've bonded over bourbon for 3 years, and now we're getting married, like
that.
in it.
Yes.
So
There
it
you
was
go.
a lot of fun. So yeah.
Do
Sorry.
you want to give a shameless plug to
My husband,
videography,
Andy
Sly?
Yeah, we have Sly Films is our videography business. We mostly do weddings, but Andy's also a YouTuber and does a lot of tech stuff and Tesla stuff, and
I know. I thought he
He's
was going to
pretty
give us all a
awesome.
joyride in his car.
I know,
Right?
I know. He's like hidden in his cave editing another
That
video.
kind of man
so.
cave.
His very techie infused man cave.
So can they find you on like Instagram or Facebook?
Yeah,
how do they find
we're
you?
on all the things. We're on all the things.
Sly Films.
Yeah, Sly Films.
Sly is
we say
SLY.
SLYE.
E, yeah, Sly.
It's the only reason I took
Sly.
that name. I feel like I could like
It is
embrace
definitely
it.
awesome. Yes.
It's a persona. I'm
It
like, I'm
is.
such a like
You're right.
organic, like natural human. I'm like, now I can be Sly.
And you even
you
moved
got
down in the alphabet, man.
I did.
Went from O to S.
I went from O to S. So I tried to convince him to merge our names to be the O Slides because I'm Scottish and his family's English. And I was like, let's be the O Slides and let's be Irish. But he wouldn't go for it.
He wasn't having any part of that.
He said, no, thanks, I'm good.
All right, good deal. Well, do we need to find Kelly Kite at whatever Instagram or something like that now?
I don't even know my Instagram. It might be
On
Kelly
Bumble?
_Kite. Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Post divorce, my family's like all about that. They're like, why? And I'm like, guys, I'm not quite there yet. Give me some time.
No thanks.
Like,
I'm good.
I was 19 when my ex-husband and I got together. And
Wow.
yeah, so I'm like, give me some time to like be an adult, like on my
Ease.
own, and like figure stuff out.
Blonde runner at no.
Yeah. Speaking of though, one of my favorite races is Urban Bourbon because you get freaking bourbon at the end of it.
Yeah.
So who doesn't love that?
Absolutely. Lindsay said, "I got nothing for
Yeah.
you." She's shaking her head at me.
Gotta,
Locking it down.
She's like, "I'm just glad I'm still standing after all this."
they're gonna wheel me out.
Absolutely. So, well, if you need to reach us, we're at bourbonbarreltalk@gmail.com, or you can hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. I think it's Bourbon
have to
Barrel
think really hard for that
T1. Yeah, that one's really hard because they wouldn't let me take the
Who
whole
tweets
thing.
these days?
Shit, I don't even tweet. Like I leave that up to Toby and Steve. That's
Right.
their job. My job is to be behind the mic. So, Scott Minton signing off. Bourbon Barrel Talk. Have a good one. Cheers.